or any person who is qualified to be appointed as a judge. Then there's going to be another one person who is of 15 years practice as a lawyer. Then there's going to be 2 other persons to represent the general public. So in total, 7 of them, with a chair also to be appointed by the president. Yes.
And before we get into the conversation of what the implications are, how successful have these petitions been in the past?
The petition against judges? Well, so far we have had 2 successful petitions. One against Honorable Justice Mutava. The other one is, of course, against the former Deputy Chief Justice, Nazi Baraza. Those are the ones which have been successful so far against judges.
So one gets the impression that the entire Supreme Court is on trial, and critics argue that it was actually impossible for Justice Tunoi on his own to make a decision at the bench that would have ruled in favor of Dr. Evans Kidero. Your thoughts?
Yes, I've always said that if at all the allegations that the money was paid to influence the decision, if that is established as a fact, then what it means is that there is no way that this money ended up with only one judge, because one judge will not be able to influence a decision where there are 7 judges sitting. He must be able to convince 3 other judges, whether by using that money or otherwise, to rule in a certain way. Therefore, in a way, in terms of the tribunal, it's not going to be looking at the only Honorable Justice Tunoi, in my view. It will look at any other persons who could have benefited from those funds. So, in a way, you're right that it's not just the Honorable Justice Tunoi who is on trial, but I think the entire Supreme Court is on trial. Yes. And
in the past, the credibility of the Supreme Court has been put in question, coming after election petitions, the 2013 general election, the Othaya election, and now looking at the issue with Ferdinand Waititu and Governor Evans Kidero. If indeed it is proven that money exchanged hands and that the bribery allegations are indeed true, going to another election and looking at possible petitions, what does this do to the credibility of the Supreme Court?
Of course, you're right. If those allegations are proved to be true, then, in my view, we do not have to go through another presidential election petition with the current judges at the Supreme Court. There is now a case for reconstituting the entire Supreme Court. Kenyans will not have any confidence in those judges sitting of an election petition, whether presidential or otherwise. But it's more complicated than that. Remember, according to the Constitution, once the Honorable Justice Tunoi is dissatisfied with the decision of the tribunal, the law or the Constitution provides that he should appeal to the Supreme Court. Now, here is an allegation that this money was paid, and this money may have been shared amongst other judges in the Supreme Court. And when you lose at the tribunal stage, your petition is going to be heard by the same judges. In my view, in view of that kind of a confusion, it is proper and fair that we do not go to the question of constitutional tribunal. Honorable Justice Tunoi should resign immediately, and another judge who is implicated in this kind of a scandal.
Staying with the Supreme Court, has it failed in its mandate in your view?
Yes, in my view, the Supreme Court has failed in its mandate. It has failed Kenyans terribly, because look at from the word go, from the first case that they decided in the presidential petition. Look at all the petitions. I can tell you that in every petition that has gone to the Supreme Court, there have been allegations of bribery and corruption involving certain litigants. So, in total, the Supreme Court has failed.
Let's move away from the Supreme Court and now talk about the receiver and the giver. We're hearing talk about Justice Tunoi, but little is being said about the person that allegedly gave the bribe. The receiver and the giver, are they not one and the same? And what are the implications, possible implications for Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero?
Well, if the tribunal establishes that indeed there was corruption or money was given out for purposes of influencing that decision, then both the receiver and the giver would be at, they could be prosecuted by the DPP. Once there is a decision from the tribunal, then the DPP will take over and now start criminal proceedings against both the receiver and the giver and any other person who may have been involved in the process.
And in the case of Ferdinand Waitito, now heading back to the Supreme Court as we wind up, what then does this mean if indeed it is proven that money exchanged hands? Ferdinand Waitito goes back to the Supreme Court over the same issue. What happens to the Nairobi gubernatorial seat?
Well, I think it is still too early in my view, for Ferdinand Waitito, Honorable Ferdinand Waitito, to go to the Supreme Court on account of these findings by the Judicial Service Commission, because this is basically a decision or a report to the effect that with the material and the evidence that we have, we believe that there may have been misconduct. But the real decision as to whether or not there has been misconduct is going to be undertaken by the tribunal. And it's only after that decision has been rendered by the tribunal that Ferdinand Waitito can now waive that decision to the Supreme Court and tell the Supreme Court to review the decision. Even if that happens, I think practically I don't see the decision being rendered before probably the next general elections. Yes.
LSK Chair Eric Mutua, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. Justice Tunoi is facing allegations that received a 200 million bribe to influence the outcome of the petition filed against Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero by Ferdinand Waitito, now the Kabete MP. The public is watching how the Judicial Service Commission will handle this high-profile issue, which is, like Eric Mutua here said, comparable to the complaints that led to the removal of former Deputy Chief Justice.